I have a barn cat. I say I have. There's a cat who lives in my barn, the barn that I lease, who was left there by the people who previously leased the barn. They just abandoned him when they left. They had adopted him and two other kitties who had all been neutered. You know, there's a trap neuter release program here in Illinois, everywhere, but I'm in Illinois. And they abandoned him. It was 13 below zero when I moved into the barn that day. So long story short, he's feral. I cannot touch him. I feed him dinner. And when a couple days, he screamed for breakfast. And I'm like, I don't feed breakfast. There's mice. Why do you think you're here? I will feed you dinner, which you weren't getting for like 6 months. Leave me alone. So we have an arrangement. And he meets me for dinner every night. Sometimes he'll run down the driveway to make sure that I move up there quickly enough. And he hisses at me while I put the food down. Good food. I give him good food, not cat food. So, I mean, fresh meat and stuff, fish. So anyway, I went to the barn the other day and his eye was closed. I'm like, oh no. I mean, I can't touch him. I can't put him in a crate to take him to the vet. I can barely put his food down. His eyes closed. I'm like, oh Lordy Lord, what? I've got this homeopathic remedy, an eye wash that's absolutely amazing that I will not share. I will share with you if you want it. I'm not a doctor, okay? I don't prescribe. But this eye wash that a friend of mine told me about years ago, she saved her horse's eye. The vets were going to remove the eye because nothing was working. The horse had uveitis and she was going to lose her eye. And this eye wash mixture saved her eye. So I know, and I've used it on my horses when they have had, they poke stuff in their eyes, or pink eye. It's just amazing stuff. How am I going to get it in his eye? I can't get it in his eye. I can't touch him. So it occurs to me, I guess what I'm talking about here, I'm not quite sure, I'm going to find my way, is about listening, just being open to stuff that comes, I don't know where it comes from, but information that comes in. So I'm home that night and I'm like, homeopathics, that's energy medicine. And I'm a Reiki master, which is not energy medicine, by the way. It is not. But you can do it from a distance. So there's a transmission involved. And I'm like, let me just try making the stuff and putting it on cotton and holding it against his eye with my Reiki hand behind it from a distance. So I did. I only see him at night. So I did it that evening after I'd already seen him. And then I did it the next morning. I didn't see him. So when I went back the next night after he'd had 2 treatments, his eye was half opened. I'm like, well, wow. So then the same thing, I did it again. And the next day his eye was completely open, but now his face was swollen like a grapefruit. This is just a normal sized cat. Huge like this and pointy on the end. I'm like, oh my Lordy Lord, what is going on? What am I going to do? I have to get him to the vet. How am I going to get him to the vet? I don't have a trap and I can't afford this. This is like an emergency visit. I have 3 of my own animals. It's like, holy Toledo, all these phone calls. Just like 2 days ago, I have a friend who has a sanctuary. She's a 501(c)(3) actual sanctuary, calling around who can help, who can bring me a cage, and she's too busy because her animals are sick. And it's like, finally I said, my vet said, it's an abscess. He needs it lanced. He didn't look at it. I just told him. And probably an antibiotic. And I'm like, I can't. So a friend of a friend said, she rescues feral. She goes, usually they can resolve these by themselves without antibiotics. It was a huge relief. So I'm like, okay, what can I do in the meantime? Oh, there's another homeopathic remedy that I won't mention that draws out abscesses. I've used it on horses who they get abscesses in their feet. Sometimes they're extremely painful. And it can take like a week, even with this, for them to blow. There's one to draw out an abscess, and there's one different homeopathic, if that doesn't work, to absorb them. So I assume when the woman said they resolve them, she was talking about absorption. Let's see if we can blow this out. Although I was a little concerned, it was so huge. So same thing. I did that night, and then the next morning, and then I saw him the next evening, and it was halfway down. And while I was Reikiing him from home, sharing my Reiki hands with him at home, holding the homeopathic in the little container, I could feel it going down. And I always question myself, am I imagining it? No, it was halfway down. So I did it again. Somebody that had brought me a cage, I'm like, I'm not putting him in this trap. He will completely flip out. This is working. Let's see what happens. So last night, okay, so yesterday afternoon, I gave him another session. I hadn't seen him in the morning. Gave him another session holding the homeopathic and my Reiki hand on his face. And we finished. And then I had a session with, I've had a lot of sessions the last few days. I had a session with a dog who's going in for surgery today. And I had to explain to her, we've had a previous conversation last week. This is part 2, that what was going to happen was if this tumor, if they couldn't remove the tumor, they were going to put her to sleep on the table, because otherwise if the tumor was in the joint, they'd have to remove the leg. And she had told me last week, she absolutely did not want that to happen. She's 14. So this is what was happening. I was explaining to her, and I was sharing my Reiki hands. I'm sharing my Reiki hands with this dog to prepare her body for the surgery today. And here's Panthero. I'm at home. He's at the barn. I just finished his session. I feel him sitting next to me. I'm like, you really like that Reiki, didn't you? You want more? Well, I'm not going to touch you. This is for Macy, but you can sit here. And a little bit later, I realized he was helping. He wasn't like trying to steal Reiki. He was helping. Here's the end of this, almost the end of the story. I was immediately reminded of my heart dog, Elika, who died 6 years ago and who was my Reiki partner, amazing healer. And when I would do, I'd sit on, I was living in a place where I didn't have a studio to do this, and I do now. But I was I'd sit on the floor with my back against the couch and do distance Reiki with animals. And as soon as I'd have my hands on the animal, Alika would run up and stick her head between my hands. It was hilarious. And I thought, oh, Reiki thief. She loves Reiki. Little Reiki thief, get out of here. I'd laugh. I wasn't mad at her. And she'd leave. She'd go lay on the couch, or if I was against the bed, she'd lay on the bed. I didn't realize until she died that she was helping me. She wasn't stealing Reiki. After she passed, I'd put my hands on an animal. This was like 2 weeks after she passed. I'd hear her head's in between my hands. I'm like, holy cow. For 15 years, I thought you were just a Reiki thief. She was helping. It was hilarious. So that Panthero reminded me of that story. And I'm like, you're helping. Oh my goodness. And he was. Thank you. And I got to the barn a few hours later, and he'd said thank you to me after the session. First time I've ever heard him speak. And then he sat next to me and he assisted. And then I got to the barn and the whole thing had blown. I mean, crap, sorry, it was gross, but blown. He was cleaning himself. So he was very grateful because this thing had blown. And now I'm doing an essential oil that's an antibiotic from a distance, seeing if that works too. That's energy medicine. I'm so excited about this. So this is a long story. And it's kind of a rough draft, I think. I'm wondering, it's about listening. I didn't know any of this. I didn't know to hold to homeopathic. And maybe he'd have blown it by himself, but it happened so fast. After 2 sessions, it was halfway down. After 2 more sessions, it had blown open. And he thanked me and then assisted. So whatever happened, I'm sure that I was of some use to him, even if just for pain management. But it happened so quickly. And now I have this new relationship with him. He's still going to hiss at me when I put the food down. That's not going to change, I don't think. Although yesterday he was sitting outside the barn just meowing at me, very gently meowing. He's never done that. It's always just, get out, food, okay, now go down, leave. He was meow, meow. He's never done that. So we'll see. I'll go tonight and see. I'm going to see as close as I can and see if that's healing. It can't get infected. If it looks bad, I'll have to find a way to get him to the vet. So here's the story about, what is it about? You can tell me what it's about. You can comment below. It's about listening and getting into the flow. I worked with like 2 other animals too, and I'm also finishing up my memoir, the 3rd draft, about my relationship with the horse who brought me to this work. And so just all of that at once, I guess I kind of got into this flow of just being immersed in the animals and their voices and their incredible intelligence and the intelligence of their bodies, and whoever or whatever was telling me to do these things that I just did. And I'm just sharing that with you. So thank you for listening. I'm Pam Sorellis of Winged Horse Healing. I do Reiki and animal communication, and Winged Horse Writing Studio, where I help writers. So thank you for listening. If you have any thoughts on what maybe this said to you, I'd love to hear them. Take care.